So I just noticed that there was a low volume issue in the previous videos. I didn't want to go back and fix it all over again. So I hope this works really well. So in this video, I want to focus on the primary aspect of healthy boundaries. Okay, let's just take the topic one at a time, and I try to dig deeper as much as possible so that it covers a lot of ground, and people who are seeking help would also be able to relate to as much as possible to this content. So to go over again and start just focusing on the healthy boundary aspect, just that one topic alone. We'll move on to the other ones like saying no and what happens after that, and how a typical human healthy person responds to a no, and how an unhealthy toxic person seeking power and control, how would they respond to it, and all other aspects that come with it. Okay, so let's just start one step at a time. So healthy boundaries are very, very, very important. Very important. And as I see in my day-to-day life, it just boggles me that a lot of people give away their right to have boundaries and respect for their space and thoughts and ideas and feelings and emotion, owning up to ourselves, right? A lot of people do not do that. And by not doing that, they think they are not burdening themselves with personal responsibility. Again, emotionally, intellectually, even otherwise. But the ignorance to it is that the lack of healthy boundaries would not just go away just because we are not taking responsibility. Because if we are not taking responsibility, owning up to our own space and ideas and privacy and right to say yes and no and all this, somebody else is going to do it. What people ignore generally is, what I've noticed, is they just don't want to take responsibility for whatever reason. Again, I'm not blaming them. I am stating whatever I've clearly observed, okay, on a day-to-day basis. So these people, they just do not entertain the idea of healthy boundaries. I mean, boundaries alone, let alone healthy boundaries. That again, the deep-seated problems come from multifaceted issues like culture, upbringing, childhood, our own tendencies and personalities. Okay, there's so many personalities. So they all come into picture, I understand. But taking the concept of boundary itself as an aspect, a lot of people forget it. They take it easy. They do not. And somebody else comes and uses a little bit of power and bulldozing and control, and they just give up. They just give up fighting for it. And probably they are tired from the rest of the other things that they are fighting for in their own lives, maybe. So this the inner willingness to set boundaries and enforce them on a regular basis becomes a primary self-care aspect. Primary. I couldn't stress this enough. I thought I was this highly self-aware, intelligent woman who knows herself well and all that. And yet there are so many times I got too tired of fighting for my own boundaries and basic rights with other people that I just gave up. So I understand the fatigue that comes with it, especially when we are surrounded by the culture that enforces and encourages and tolerates and enables toxic behaviors like narcissism, antisocial behavior and all such. So what becomes is the culture starts gravitating more towards extreme selfishness, dangerous and unhealthy selfishness. It is almost rewarding the selfish behavior and almost punishing the people who are setting boundaries. That's how deep this problem runs, and it's really sad because it shouldn't be this bad. Okay, once people learn the beauty of healthy boundaries and saying no and yes and actually going, it gives a lot of freedom, personal freedom actually, a sense of ownership. And when you take away all that, okay, basic human rights that we have and refuse to give importance to our own boundaries, because they all come from values, and if we take all those things lightly, somebody else is going to take control over that. Unfortunately, it all happens. It always happens, because if you're not doing something, somebody else is going to go take over that space anyways. Definitely. It's just, I think it's just how even nature works, or it's just how a lot of our systems, okay, all of our systems that we work in, that we live in, they are also built in such a way that you do not take ownership for something. Somebody else is going to come take over it. So if we start not taking responsibility for our own hygiene, mental, emotional hygiene, somebody else is going to come and walk all over it. And then they wreck it, because come on, it's not theirs, right? It's not theirs. So they will think they are entitled to do with it as they please, and then they walk all over it, and then they damage it, then walk away from it. And we are left with what? More things to work on ourselves. And as these aspects keep piling up, and as we keep ignoring our own well-being for the sake of being nice, or I want to be that person who gets along very well, and I want to have this social gathering where all these people are important to me, if we start doing that, and doing that on a regular basis, the price ultimately, unfortunately, will be paid by us only. That's one thing a lot of people conveniently forget. The price is going to be ultimately paid by us only. The person, whoever it is, that is ignoring the importance of healthy boundaries, okay, setting their own core values, personalities, and unable to make a clear demarcation of this is my behavior, this is something that defines me, and that is who I am, and this is not who I am also. Okay, the both sides of the boundary. If someone doesn't have a healthy self-awareness of themselves, and they give their power away by letting somebody else define boundaries for them, or even walk all over it, they're going to pay a high cost for themselves, their well-being, psychological, physical, emotional, and eventually they just forget who they are. And again, contrary to the comfort that we think we are giving ourselves to by not taking responsibility for self-care and self-love, it's not easy to give up all those things and give those very important aspects of who we are to somebody else, external, give it to some other external power instead of taking it to ourselves, okay, taking it up with ourselves. We are going to be paying the ultimate price. Why? It starts affecting every single aspect of our life. Believe me, I'm not exaggerating. Because when you look at setting a boundary and developing your own personality, any person who has actually gone through a personal transformation journey because of a huge loss, a huge heartbreak, and they were able to heal from it instead of getting bitter from it, anybody who has done a deep, okay, wound healing, okay, from any kind of trauma or suffering and loss, grief, they would know what I'm talking about, because it changes them. And it also means suddenly learning a very important aspect of who they are, which nudges them or even sometimes shakes them into setting a whole new order to their own life. Which means a lot of things that were in the old previous life, they have to let go. They have to forgive, they have to forgive themselves, they have to have compassion for themselves and others, and finally be able to let go. Which means what? Leaving the comfort zone. Leaving what we knew to be familiar, convenient, A little bit of, it's not satisfying to our soul. We all know that when we are compromising and sacrificing who we are on the inside, we all know that it is not comfortable. Just that we all cover up with certain behaviors. We call them defense mechanisms and tendencies and attitudes, complexes, certain complexes. Well, sometimes I use psychological terms, but I'm a psychology graduate. I'm just trying to use those terms because they're appropriate. But I'm just focusing on using as simple, normal terms as possible. So these are the complexes and tendencies and disorders or even dysfunctional personalities we develop as a consequence of we ignoring who we are on the inside. So there is always a price to pay. And if we are unwilling to let go of the comfort zone, if we are unwilling to heal and take the power back and do your own analysis of who we are and who we are not, which requires work, which requires personal work, and takes some time, takes effort, takes some tears, but it will be worth it. Why? Because you come out a different person. You come out a little lighter, or better, and with a more clarity of what stays in your life and what goes. And that becomes a very crucial thing to understand about boundaries as well, because as we set boundaries and as we begin our healing slowly, one step at a time, there is something that is always changing inside of us that will eventually change us enough that we look back after XYZ amount of time and realize, oh, this is the difference with this particular habit, this particular self-care that I've taken, that this particular actions I've taken on my life. This is how it has changed my life, my choices, my thinking, my well-being. It starts showing up. The changes will start showing up. And that's a good reward if you ask me. But it will all be very slow, tiny, but it has to come from within. It has to come from within. Anybody can tell you, this is the curriculum, this is the framework, this is this is that. But ultimately the work has to be coming from inside of who we are. But the material is important because it's showing us, it's nudging us to, hey, pay attention here. This is somewhere you've been going wrong, or you are not doing it the healthy way or good for in the best interest of you. So please pay attention, kind of, okay? So you take that information, you try to work on it, and you work more on it, and then you actually consciously, willingly do corrections to your own work. The changes will show. And again, because of the changes, some things will leave our life, some things will stay, some things will change forever. And instead of hanging on to the comfort zone, which only brought more toxicity and power issues in our life, we should be able to embrace those changes, because it has to be that way. It has to be that way. Why? Because if you're stuck in certain loop and certain cycles, there is nothing going on there. It's just a repetitive cycle. There has to be a point where you say, no, not this anymore. Something has to change, and the change has to begin from within me, my own tendencies. And from there, everything begins. Okay, so with just that snippet of wisdom, I would take a break for this video. I'll come back with something that connects to this and elaborates on this later. Thank you.